And welcome to a new episode of League of DFS. My name is Chris Chung, primetime on Twitter. Tonight we have a special guest from DotESports, Xing. How are you doing tonight, Xing?
I'm doing just fine, Chris. Glad to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm finally glad that we are able to have you on. I've been anticipating your appearance on the show, and I'm just excited to pick your mind on League of Legends. It's been a growing sport, and I'm glad to there are more and more people interested in this. So, can we get a little background about yourself, how you got involved in Dot Esports, how you got involved in League of Legends, and what do you do at Dot Esports?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I got involved with League playing with friends, and they carried me for about a season and a half. And then it was around that time also that I discovered, the esports aspect of it, and that almost made League really come to life for me even more than just playing the game because I'm not that mechanically skilled. I don't have a lot of time to really grind solo queue, but the competitive aspect of it really was awesome. When they broadcasted season 3 Worlds from Staples, I thought that was an awesome moment for not just League but all of esports. You see a lot of the Western scenes really take off after that point. And then as far as for me at Dot, I just started writing. I saw that there was a market for people that wanted to know more about the scene. I just started writing on my own, and then I moved to managing another website, and found Dot kind of just randomly one day. But I built up enough of a portfolio to them, and so things, and we have.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. It's great to hear. Like you, myself, I'm not mechanically skilled at all. Still rely on teams to carry me. Just yesterday, I played the Rise in mid lane, and lo and behold, my stat line looks
Ooh.
like a support more than a mid laner. It was terrible,
Rise
but
mid lane is not the easiest champ to play.
no, I was ambitious. I thought I saw the Bjergsen video on YouTube, and I was like, I'm ready. No, I'm not ready. I'll go back to my Morgana. I'll go back to my Rakan. Those are my comfort picks.
There you go.
That's awesome. Yes, and it's this fascinating sports is growing. I stumbled upon it in two different ways. First is the YouTube that they're broadcasting all the regions, which is fantastic. And then I stumbled on into the fantasy world. It's a little well-known fantasy product, but it's growing. I've seen a couple of sites trying to attempt to this, but for now, I think the DraftKings daily fantasy sports idea is one of the more successful and sustaining one, even more so than the product, the fantasy LCS that's being offered. So tonight, I'm
Sure.
glad you're here to help us because all of my viewers, as well as myself, I'm new to the the world of League esports. There's a lot of different regions, a lot of different teams, but we're specifically focused on the weekends when people have time to watch and play. So, if you can give us a your thought on how the current summer split has gone and what have been your impression about both the European and the North American side.
I think in Europe, it's kind of a role reversal where Europe used to be kind of a chaotic middle. I think the pecking order in Europe is incredibly clear right now, more clear than maybe even so going back to the 2015 season when Fnatic clearly at the top. G2 Fnatic are still good. You have some mid-tier teams that need to work some things out, like Rocket and Vitality and even FC Schalke. And then you have the teams at the bottom. North America, I have no idea. You have 4 teams tied for first place, another massive tie right after that. And of those 4 teams, I don't know that of them and the others. So it's not like, one team has been getting unlucky or whatever. It's really inconsistent performances from everyone in the league table, all the way down to basically Optic, who they've been consistently bad. So that's not really good news for them either.
That's exactly right. It does seem like a bit of a reversal from the spring split where we see the teams are closely tied in the European region, whereas in the North American region where there were clear strong teams and clear bottom teams. But right now in this summer split, we see kind of a much closer as far as win-loss record goes for North American, but it's not because they're all equally strong and it's hard to tease them out. It's like you mentioned, it's very much inconsistent plays. We see Team Liquid losing to Golden Guardians, losing to FlyQuest, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those losses, you really don't understand what the team is thinking. It seems like they go in with a specific strategy and they just abandon it for no apparent reason. It's not like the other teams are necessarily playing better or using the map in creative ways and punishing. It's more of teams walking into mistakes into plays that they never should have made, or they're giving up opportunities on plays that they were designed to take. Uh, I think the meta has perhaps more heavily impacted NA than any other region. I mean, you look at the other regions, most of the good teams from spring are still good now.
Mm-hmm.
LPL top teams still performing. So I think North America is our own special case of dysfunction.
And it's very unfortunate because I do think North American draws in a lot of people who want to root for their traditional powerhouses like Team Solo Mid or Team Liquid. So let me touch on a couple of teams, and perhaps you can help us understand what the direction is of these teams. Do you think, as far as Echo Fox goes, they just announced that their coach Inero is resigning, and the team looks, to me at the least, looks like there's a solo queue top lane, a solo queue jungle, and a solo queue mid, and then there's a bot lane who is not nondescript for the most part. What is the direction for Echo Fox? Where are they going, and do you think that they'll be back in the top for this summer?
I think it's really tough for them. I think the coaching change is really tough. Like you mentioned, they play around strong solo lanes with that jungler, right? So they had an identity that one way to draft, and that was, and it wasn't working out, right? So you saw what happened at the end of the spring playoffs, but then even this split, other teams, especially the European, and now that they need to change things up, I think that's when the coaching change really hurts them. I don't know how fast they're able to learn a new style, like learn how to prioritize the bot lane. When
Right.
it's, the mid lane has been a problem for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Juggling players there, Phoenix, Demonte. So whoever you have there, I think it's tougher with a narrow gun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little bit more excited about Demontes because of his more aggressive style, but at the end of the spectrum is he's also not gelling with the rest of the team, which seems to be also something that I see from Huni and Dardoch as well. But that's what they're relying on. They're relying a lot on Dardoch and Huni to carry the team, and it's not going to be able to take them far, from my sense. Do you see a change that in the future, perhaps the new coach or the new meta that might be able to help them get back to the top?
I don't know that the meta is going to help, because if you're looking at carry top laners and early game junglers, this is the meta for it. So theoretically, they should be playing really well. They're not, which to me indicates that there's more fundamental problems. Their talent level is still super high, so I see it's going to be hard for them to fall out of the playoffs. And I would still expect them to make something like semifinals. But against teams that can play better macro games, can extend games, and get them into uncomfortable situations, I think it's going to be really, really tough for them to close, even if they have leads on Huni. And then you saw at Rift Rivals, it's not even a given that you're going to have a lead on Huni. So I really, it's tough for me to say what'll change for them. I do wonder. I mean, Demonte is an interesting character. Phoenix is supposed to be like a mechanical genius too, right? If you're looking at mid laners that you could reliably build around, it used to be Phoenix that was one of them, and I don't know if that's the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very true. So let's move on to our second team that's seeing changes in their roster, and I don't understand the decision at this time, but for 100 Thieves to move on from Meteos in hopes of playing Levi, but with the import rules of no more than 2 international players, it's creating a sort of a sudden abrupt effect on the team chemistry, and we saw that not necessarily in day 1 of the last weekend, but day 2 we saw that there was a disconnect with the team chemistry. What are your thoughts on what 100 Thieves are thinking in making this move at this time?
Yeah, I think 100 Thieves, maybe they were put in a tough position by Meteos requesting the trade. One thing is, I have said this before. I'm not 100% convinced in Levi. I love the player that we saw at MSI and Worlds last year. I love how fun he is. He's a great. Results are there in the Academy League. I'm not sure what I would have expected from a quote unquote star that they've tried with him, where he's a very heavy carry focus in the jungle, and you can kind of do that because the bot lane is self-sufficient and someday doesn't need resources. But I don't know if that's sustainable long term, right? Like they change.
Can you
if you
repeat
don't
that?
know how to
Sorry.
play supportive type jungler.
Yeah, can
Yeah,
you
go
repeat
ahead.
that? Yeah, can you repeat that? It was cut off a little bit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. So I don't know if it's sustainable to win long term if you're only playing carry style junglers. You look at the teams that are good at Worlds and MSI in years past, and it's teams that have the ability to the junglers that play for vision and control objectives. So I don't know. I don't know if the move to Levi is for sure, and if it's Onda, I don't know if there's a huge drop off, but it definitely lowers their ceiling.
Okay. Okay. So there's not that big of a drop off in your estimation between Meteos and Onda. So it could potentially keep some of the. It's just a matter of taking a couple of weeks of scrimming and practice that for them to gel back to the same level that you expect to see from 100 Thieves.
Yeah, Meteos is a fantastic jungler, but I don't think he's the most important player on that team. I don't think he's not. I mean, you're looking at someday Afromu, and then if they need a guy to step up, it's Cody's son. He has to be more consistent.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. So let's moving from North American to Europe. What is happening with Splyce? I can understand that the meta may not fit them well, but at this point, I was certain that they would adapt better because of the reputation of this organization. But so far, we've seen major inconsistency. We see that they're not even competing well in international states. They did beat Team Liquid, so that they get credit for that, and then they come back and beat. I think they beat Fanatics, and then the following day they just lost to the bottom team. What's going on there?
Yeah, Splyce it's really interesting because we've seen several iterations of Splyce over the years, and there's a common theme that they love to play for late game. They love to scale up, and they are consistently poor in the laning phase, and they get caught out for unknown reasons. And that's something that they're going to have to fix because, games are ending earlier. That's something that's not a strength of theirs in this meta. There is hope for them in that if the meta changes, maybe, it'll be more favorable to them than it would be like an Echo Fox who are kind of stuck a little bit more. But yeah, they have to figure out what they're doing in the early game. And Xerxes really needs to play better. He's the guy that I'm looking for. If I were to target one player, he's a creative jungler. He's got a big champion pool. He can play more of the early game picks, but he has to figure out how to do that more consistently. They can't keep falling behind by massive amounts of gold in 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely correct. So I know we've kind of been focusing so much on the negatives of all these teams that we just talked about. So let's talk about someone who is really taking this split by storm, and that's Misfit. I had high hopes for them. I saw them pulling upsets at Worlds last year, but in the spring split, they look to have fallen way behind to make any impact in the spring. But now in the summer, they're undefeated. They just took down G2, the king of EU. What do you foresee it's been helping them, and do you think this will continue on for the rest of this split?
The ironic thing for Misfits is they took Splyce's old mid laner, Senkux, who was one of those key guys that would not do well in lane phase. He's been at the bottom of the table for early game numbers for years. And now he's at least middle of the table, right? Like he's at least average. And then he's giving his team a lot in fights. I think shoring up the early game weakness was huge for them. And they're firing on all cylinders. Maxlore is controlling the map. They really have a good idea of not only what they want to do, but what their enemies want to do. You look at their games against the Funnel comp, and they've played those games nearly perfectly in terms of attacking Funnel at its weakest points in the side lanes and in the jungle. And I think that's really impressive for me. The game against G2 was from both teams. And then their players were just better.
Yeah, Absolutely.
right now. He was really good last split too,
Mm-hmm.
but he's continued to be play well. And Mickey X has really stepped up as well on those engaged type of supports that they were really good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. These improvement does show up even as we play fantasy LCS, and that has shown up. Well, that's a good description of what we are hoping to see from these teams and what we are going to expect for the rest of the summer. So let's move on to something that most of my viewers and myself are not familiar. You have been involved in the esports pro scene for quite some time, much longer than most of us have. Now, when a big patch change happens, something that happens, for example, in season 8, 8.1 was different than 8.5 when they finally sped up the game. So we're now in 8.13. How has
Pro play is an 8.13.
Yeah, how has teams traditionally adapted to such changes, and do you see them making improvements as the season go on, or do they more or less at the mercy of whatever the changes so whatever the changes, they have to adapt to it, and some teams that just can't adapt will just fall to the wayside?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because the stage games are always a patch behind what's live.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens for most teams is, when patch drops midweek,
Mm-hmm.
on that patch, and then they also play solo queue on that patch, obviously, because they have to.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're learning the patch behind the scenes, and then when Saturday or Friday comes or Sunday, they kind of use the muscle memory from the previous patch. So now you have to kind of reorient yourself to what was strong on the last patch and what your team was doing on that patch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more of like a muscle memory type of thing on stage. Pros have said that it's kind of it's more nerve-wracking the first time or the first few times when you're not used to it, but it's something that they've learned to deal with over the years, and they've learned to Thursday night practice to Friday morning you're playing a game on stage, and now you're on the previous patch.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that bit of muscle memory that they build in. As far as what's going to happen the rest of the season, I'm really they take some of the buffs to ADC. They've been quietly, or not so quietly, kind of buffing them in these smaller patches that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that it's really enough. I don't think ADCs are unplayable. I think you can play some of the marksman in the bot lane if you design your comp well enough. And I think Misfits have shown that works. But for teams that, like Fnatic, are holding out their ADC or that aren't focused on the marksman bot lanes, I don't think that these changes are enough for them to try to experiment and bring those back into the...
Okay. So in short, the upcoming patches don't seem to make that big of a difference as in what we've already seen so far in the summer split. So let's segue into then 8.14, which is going to drop in week 6 of the pro sports scene. What are some of the changes that you noticed that might affect how players must adapt to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple big changes. There's the big kind of updates to Aatrox. I'm not certain that this does anything. Their whole goal really gain power. I think if you still like Aatrox, he's still going to be good. Fizz is a little bit different. I'm on the fence with Fizz. I think he's not really a strong champion in this meta. If you're going to play an assassin mid lane, I think there's other options. The other kind of champion changes I don't think really do anything. I am interested in teleport. Teleport, the cooldown was nerfed, and I think that's more of a solo queue thing, where if you have players that want to be that solo carry and they want to take ignite anyway, they're probably going to be more prone to take it even in top lane. I don't think pro top laners will go away from teleport. I still think it'll be really important for them because of how they use it as a late game tool. Nerfing the cooldown doesn't really affect what happens after 20 minutes because you're really waiting on Baron and Dragon and Eldrake anyway. So I don't think that it has that big of an impact in the late game, and I think we'll still see a lot of pro top laners take it, although maybe some mid laners that took it before will move to other.
Right. Maybe we'll go back to the double smite for mid and
the talent. Hey, the talent smite thing is...
Yeah.
came up in pro play a little while ago. So, stay tuned.
Oh yeah, the talent definitely. I have seen mixed results. Mostly, if he does do well, he can take over the game. I think which LPL team did that just recently. I can't remember, but
I
it
know
was.
Golden Guardians did it with Mickey,
That's right.
and it was pretty successful for him.
And that's one. Yeah, and that's
Must have been like Snake or something.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
the ones that are doing crazy stuff over there.
Yeah, definitely. Mickey did stand out last weekend, and we're excited about the direction that Golden Guardians heading. We're not completely sold on it that they're going to be as successful as last week, but it's certainly a good to see positive steps in these lower teams, this new expansion teams, if you will. Fantastic. So before I let you go, then Zing, could you? I don't know if you had the chance to look at this week's games. Which ones, if you did, if which one stood out to you? Which one do you think there's a potential upset in the making? And which one are you most excited to watch?
Yeah, one that's not so much of an upset, but is gonna really tell us a lot about Liquid play CLG on Sunday. CLG was terrible last split, and they've really come on. They played a really good game against Cloud9 last week. They've shown some advanced understandings of how to use pressure and the map to their advantage. Looking at CLG's schedule coming down the stretch, if they can come out of this week either 1-1 or even 2-0, they're really set up well the last 4 weeks of the split to kind of hone in on playoffs and maybe even take one of the top seeds. So they're tied for first, and they could shoot ahead. In EU, I'm looking for G2 to get back on track against Vitality. That Misfits game, lost it. It was still a well-played game, and then they just lost focus. I want to see them bounce back against Vitality, who are playing pretty well. And I think that will be a really interesting game between those two. And then, of course, Misfits Fnatic versus, second time around. Fnatic need to get this victory. They need to show that they can beat Misfits. And so I'm excited for that on Saturday.
Absolutely. Yes, those are some of the games that I've highlighted, and it's been quite difficult for me to decide who would win between the Misfit and Fnatic game, even though Misfit is now the heavy favorite. I think it can set them up well. Last question. I think our viewers always want to know who is going to win Worlds.
Ooh, this is a tough one.
Yes.
It really hurts RNG, I think, that Uzi is out. I don't know that they are incapable of winning the LPL without him, but it's going to be tough to win World. He's so good at international tournaments. So I would normally say RNG is up there. In the LCK, Griffin is playing so well. I don't know if I can pick a. Never seen a team kind of do that.
Yeah.
And then you look at second place, and it's like, Gen G, they've kind of been, they've won. They won last year. Maybe they'll do it again. It's really tough to say at this point.
Well, I'm sure they don't expect any of us to know the answer, but those are some of the teams that we are watching out for. I'm glad Gen G is making a big stride to making an effort to play well again. Last spring did not look good for them, and it was supposed to be the year of Uzi until an injury, unfortunately, derailed him. But we get to see some crazy stuff like Zizitai playing mid or bot. It's a lot of craziness. It's a lot of fun things that's happening.
Yeah.
Well, Xing, thank you so much for coming on the show. Your thoughts have been amazing to help us get ready for this weekend. Where can our listeners and where can our viewers find your work, learn more about you, and just learn more about your the work that you are putting out there?
Yeah, so I'm a writer for DotESports. It's DOTEsports.com. We put a lot of stuff out there, both about the game and about the esports aspect of it. And then you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Xing Li, Xin.
Excellent. So, listeners, please follow him. Go support his work. I know Xing, Aaron, Brian, they're all doing amazing works. They produce right after the game ends. I know I can already see an article up there and just read about the things that happened during that game. Those are insightful. It will help you in both enjoyment of the game as well as your fantasy games. Thank you so much, Xing, and viewers, stay tuned as I will be breaking down this weekend slate on the fantasy side. And welcome back. We are now going to break down the DFS portion of the slate. This weekend is an exciting set of games again. Again, as with every show, I'm going to be talking about the European Friday slate and the North American Saturday slate because those are the salaries that are out right now, and that's all we have. I'm also moving my full disclosure portion, the review portion of my lineups, what happened with cash as the day ends. I will post them on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. It's at FFDynasty101 or Prime Time. Same with spelled as my Twitter and as my email. And I will be posting my thoughts, my pictures of my cash lineup and how it did for that day. Last weekend was profitable for me. I've been able to consistently cash in all, I think 3 of the 4 slates, and hit on some GPP to mitigate some of the losses I had sustained from a bad cash game. I think CLG and Misfit basically carried me through both days, and I think those are some of the teams that are really benefiting right now from the fantasy side of stuff. So let's talk about the EU slates. Let's talk about Friday slate. We have Schalke 04 against H2K, Rocket against Misfits, Splyce against Giants, Unicorns of Love against Fanatics, G2 against Team Vitality. So the salary is really tight for the favorites and really tight for the underdogs. It almost forces you to have to play a favorite and an underdog and mix them together, even if in a cash game kind of build, and none of the matchups are very appealing. The closest one we're looking at is maybe Schalke 04 against H2K, and for me, Schalke has been traditionally a low-scoring type of team, but they are playing against the weakest team out there. This could be a spot for H2K to win, but I doubt it. I think Schalke will win. Might be low-scoring, but they will provide you with the salary relief you need. The other teams that I'm looking at for cash considerations are Misfits and G2. Both will have a appealing matchup, especially for Misfits again. As if they're not already strong enough, they're going against Rockets, who's been volatile. This does put me in a pause as I'm talking about this, that Rocket occasionally does pull off a weird upset against stronger teams than themselves, and Misfit is on a crazy streak. So for GPP mindedness, if you are GPP minded, if you are contrarian, maybe Rocket is the team you want to stack against and throw it in one of those $1, $3, $8 GPP. Fanatics, I'm expecting a very low ownership because people will rather pivot to Fanatics or pivot to G2. So this is a little look of what I have in mind, a little preview of my build, what I'm thinking about. This build will start off with Misfits mostly, and then I'll stack them together with Vitality. Am I confident in Vitality? Not at all. But even in losses, Vitality seems to be able to put up in the 15 to 20 point range, which I think is enough for what you can get out of their salary. So if I stack Vitality with Misfit, this is what I get. The flex spot and the team spot, I left them open for you. You have 5,700 to play around with teams. You can always just fill it with a team that you think will score highly on objective games base. We have Splyce who does that well. We have Fnatic that does that well. Rocket, G2, all of them do those well. And then you'll fill out your flex with the remaining players, and hopefully by now you'll learn that supports are not necessarily a good play to go double support or triple support in a best of one kind of format. So I would avoid that as much as possible. That's kind of where I'm stand at cash right now. If I do decide to go to G2, there's not going to be a major shift because the savings you get from dropping from Misfits to G2 is negligible in a sense. But if you do go to G2, you could potentially upgrade Vitality to perhaps H2K if you're willing to take that risk, or you play Rocket G2 as the contrarian that I'm talking about for GPP. But because there's not much to save from Misfit, and I think that having Vitality and G2 in the same lineup does not help with the correlation play, I would rather go with Vitality and Misfit for cash. So that's where I'm standing today, and that's where I'm suggesting for you to go. looking at the North American side of things, we have a couple of games which the odds have not been released yet, so it's kind of difficult for me to decide. But since the salaries are released, we can see that we have the games from TSM against Optics, CLG against Golden Guardians, Team Liquid against C9, Echo Fox against 100 Thieves, and Clutch Gaming against FlyQuest. The few interesting spot here is that Golden Guardians are a much faster paced team now, whether they win or not against CLG, who are one of the hottest team, number one, like one of the top teams right now in North America. This could be potentially a what we refer to as a bloody game or a fiesta or just a fast pace, a lot of stats kills. So being on either side would be great, but of course I'm always going to lean on the favorite. According to Vegas and CLG stack, here works well. As you had heard from my conversation with Xing, he has actually shown more optimism, a little bit more optimism for 100 Thieves. The drop from Meteos to Anda isn't as disastrous as I think it, in my mind, it sounded to be. So if 100 Thieves can maintain that fundamentally sound approach, whereas Fox is still trying to discover their identity and how they fit in this current meta, like you hear, this meta was meant for them and they're still not doing well. They have this volatility to them. So maybe perhaps even in a loss for 100 Thieves, I still think they can put up points because Fox has just been giving up so many deaths per game. Even when they win, even when they lose, they put there's a high pace to it. And this might provide us for some high floor kind of play. So 100 Thieves, a CLG stack. I leave the flex open. I leave the team open for you to decide how you want to play those. You'll have some salaries left over if you try to fill it out with CLG and 100 Thieves. That leaves you upgrading from the team spot to a team that you are confident in, whether that's Clutch Gaming, TSM, and CLG, or Team Liquid. All of those are viable options, and then you just fill out your flex. So that's it for the lineup portion. I hope this helps you kind of think about what you want to build in cash for both those slates. My cheat sheet will be attached to this video. It will be in the description section. Find me on Twitter if you have any questions about the games this weekend. If anything changes, I will try to let you know as soon as possible on my Twitter timeline. That's the best way to reach me. That's the best way to keep up to date with what my thoughts are about the slate. And just continue spreading the news. We want League of Legends to grow. This week has been a great week. I see people taking a break from baseball, or baseball is taking a break from you guys, actually. And there's a lot of exciting games for them to try out, including PGA, NASCAR, and all those different things. But League of Legends right now, you have an edge. Just by having a sound process, you have an edge over the field because very few people know how to play this game well. And it's been helpful for me to build my bankroll, and I'm continue to play this. This is also a good game to pay attention to before the football season starts in a month and a half from now. So catch me on FF Dynasty 101 on my email, my YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. Let your friends know. Let people who wants to play DFS know. Give a shout out to my new subscriber out there, Matt. I've also met a couple of great people from DFS Curve, and also continue to chat in the Slack room. We are a growing community in there, and people have been very sharp with their takes and really are able to take down some of the higher end GPP in there. Continue to talk out your process. We'll continue to share my thoughts in the Slack channel as well. If you want to access it, just ask for Fantasy Insider, I think, or Insight, Fantasy Sports Insight. I'm sorry, yes. And they will get you in the Slack channel too, and they'll chat it up. Also, go visit John George's betting articles on the Action Network, one of the best site out there for sports betting kind of information. I've used those. The descriptions usually help with the daily fantasy sports side of things too, but particularly helping us decide which teams are in play. And if I don't win the major one this week, I hope you will. All right, that's really just taken from they're taken from the guys at DraftKings DFS Edge. But sincerely, if I don't win this week, I hope that you are the one that construct the perfect process, the perfect lineup to help you take down multiple GPPs. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.